January 1943. Over the frozen mud of Guadalcanal, a lone F-4F Wildcat banks hard into a turning fight with 3 Japanese Zeros. The pilot drops his flaps mid-combat, full deflection. His squadron mates think he's lost his mind. The Zeros tighten their circles, closing for the kill. Then something impossible happens. The Wildcat turns inside them. The South Pacific Air War is a war of geometry and death. Japanese fighters dominate the sky not through speed or firepower, but through one unforgiving advantage: turn radius. The Mitsubishi A6M0 can pull a full deflection turn tighter than anything the Americans fly. In a dogfight, tighter means survival, wider means a bullet in your fuel tank. American pilots know this within their first week of combat. The doctrine is clear. Do not turn with a Zero. Use altitude, use speed, dive, fire, climb away. Never commit to a horizontal fight. Never try to outmaneuver what you cannot outmaneuver. The F-4F Wildcat is a sturdy machine. It can take punishment, it can dive fast, but in a slow, knife-edge turn, it is outmatched. The Zero's lighter airframe and larger control surfaces allow it to bleed speed without losing lift. It can hang in the sky, rotate like a compass needle, and bring its guns to bear, while American pilots are still fighting their own inertia. By early 1943, hundreds of young men have died learning this lesson. The Pacific theater is a patchwork of coral atolls, volcanic islands, and endless blue water. There are no front lines in the traditional sense. There are only airstrips, supply lines, and the pilots who defend them. Guadalcanal is one such strip. Henderson Field, a scar of packed dirt carved from jungle and blood. The air above it hums with tension. Squadrons rotate in and out. Fresh pilots arrive pale and confident. Veterans leave gaunt and silent. The sun is relentless. The humidity makes steel sweat. At dawn, the ocean mist clings to the wings of parked fighters. By noon, the metal is too hot to touch. Mechanics work in the shade of palm trees, pulling maintenance on engines that run too hot and guns that jam too often. There is no luxury here. No depot-level overhaul. Parts are scavenged, repairs are improvised. If a pilot brings a plane back with holes in the wings, the ground crew patches it with whatever they have and sends it back up. This is the world where logic must outpace doctrine, or men die. And it is here, in this narrow margin between survival and extinction, that one pilot begins to see what others do not. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. His name is Marion Eugene Carl. Before the war, he is a farm boy from Oregon. Quiet, methodical, the son of a school teacher and a rancher. He grows up around machines that break and must be fixed, tractors, pumps, combines. He learns early that a problem is just a system you haven't understood yet. He does not dream of flying. He dreams of engineering school. But in 1938, he sees a poster for the Navy's aviation cadet program. The pay is decent, the training is free. He applies not out of romanticism, but practicality. Flight school is a kind of engineering, physics made visible. He wants to understand how things work in 3 dimensions. He is accepted, he is good at it. His instructors note his precision. He does not over-control. He does not chase the horizon. He flies with the calm of someone solving an equation. During aerobatics training, while other cadets wrestle the stick, Carl flies with his fingertips. He listens to the airframe, feels the buffet before the stall, reads the wind through the rudder pedals. He earns his wings in 1939. He is assigned to fighters. He is unremarkable in appearance, average height, slim build, brown hair, a face you would not pick out of a crowd. But in the cockpit, he is different. He thinks in terms of energy states, angles of attack, moments of inertia. When the war begins, he is stationed in San Diego. then Hawaii. Then, in mid-1942, he is sent to the Solomons as part of VMF 223, a Marine fighter squadron flying F-4F Wildcats out of Henderson Field. His first combat sortie is in August 1942. He engages a formation of Japanese bombers over Iron Bottom Sound. He downs 2. The next day, he downs 3 more. Within a month, he is an ace. But he is not satisfied. Every engagement teaches him the same lesson. The Wildcat is inferior in a turning fight. Doctrine says to avoid it. Carl understands doctrine. He also understands that doctrine assumes you can always choose your engagement. In reality, combat is chaos. The enemy does not wait for favorable conditions. Sometimes you are caught low and slow. Sometimes you are alone. Sometimes the only option is to turn. So he begins to experiment. He starts with the basics. The Wildcat's flaps are hydraulically actuated. They deploy in stages: neutral, half, full. Their purpose is to increase lift during landing and takeoff. In combat, they are never used. The drag penalty is too high. The control forces become too heavy. The aircraft slows to a crawl. But Carl notices something. When flaps are deployed, the wing's effective camber increases. Lift coefficient rises. The stall speed drops. In theory, this means the aircraft can sustain a tighter turn at lower airspeeds before departing controlled flight. In theory. He begins testing it alone, away from the rest of the squadron. At altitude, where a mistake will not kill him. He enters a hard turn, then drops the flaps to half deflection. The nose pitches down. The drag is immediate. But the turn radius tightens. He pulls harder on the stick. The Wildcat hangs in the air, shuddering, but it does not stall. He tries it again. Full flaps this time. The effect is more pronounced. The airplane slows dramatically, but the turn is brutally tight. Tighter than he thought possible. Tighter, he realizes, than a zero at equivalent energy. The cost is altitude. The cost is speed. But in a slow-speed scissors, in a last-ditch defensive turn, it might be enough. He begins using it in combat, not often, not recklessly, but when the situation demands it, when a zero commits to a turning fight and Carl has no altitude to trade, he drops the flaps and pulls. The first time, the zero overshoots. The Japanese pilot, expecting the Wildcat to slide wide, finds himself in front of Carl's gun sight. Carl fires. The zero comes apart. He does it again 2 days later. Same result. Word spreads slowly. Some pilots ask him about it. He explains the aerodynamics. Most nod politely. Some dismiss it outright. Flaps are for landing. This is combat. You do not slow down in combat. You do not add drag. You do not break the rules written in blood by men who learned them the hard way. But Carl keeps doing it, and he keeps surviving. The problem is not new. It is systemic. The F-4F Wildcat was never meant to fight the Zero. It was designed in the late 1930s when the U.S. Navy's primary concern was fleet defense. Its role was to intercept bombers, not dogfight nimble carrier fighters. It was built to be tough, armored, armed with 650 caliber machine guns. It could absorb damage and keep flying, but it could not turn. The Zero, by contrast, was designed for maneuverability above all else. Its airframe was light, its engine was powerful relative to its weight. It carried no armor. Its fuel tanks were unprotected. In a straight fight, the Wildcat could shred it with a single burst. But the Zero would never give you a straight fight. Japanese doctrine emphasized the turning engagement. Their pilots trained obsessively in aerobatics and close-quarters maneuvering. They understood energy management. They knew how to bait an opponent into bleeding speed, then snap into a tight spiral and bring guns to bear. American pilots adapted, tactics evolved, the thatch weave, boom and zoom, Mutual support. Stay fast, stay high. Never fight alone. These tactics worked. They saved lives, but they also imposed constraints. You could only engage on your terms. If you were caught out of position, if you were jumped from above, if you were alone and low on fuel, the math turned against you. And there were always situations where the math turned against you. Pilots died not because they were cowards, but because they followed doctrine in situations where doctrine no longer applied. The institution could not adapt faster than the battlefield. The engineers were thousands of miles away. The tacticians were writing manuals based on after-action reports that were weeks old by the time they were analyzed. But the pilots were there, in the moment, with seconds to decide. Carl saw this gap. He saw that the F-4F had untapped potential, not in what it was designed to do, but in what it could be made to do. The flaps were not a landing aid. They were a variable geometry tool, a way to reconfigure the wing in flight. He was not the first to think of it. Test pilots had explored flap deployment at low speeds during carrier trials, but they had done so in controlled conditions, with spotters and safety margins, never in combat, never against an opponent who would punish hesitation with cannon fire. Carl's insight was not theoretical, it was operational. He understood that in a knife fight, the advantage goes to whoever can redefine the terms. If the Zero expected the Wildcat to turn wide, then turning tight became the surprise. But surprise only works if you survive the first attempt. The risk was enormous. Deploying flaps in combat meant committing to a low-energy state. If the technique failed, if the aircraft stalled or became uncontrollable, there would be no time to recover. The Zero would close from behind and pour fire into the cockpit. Carl tested it anyway, not because he was reckless, but because he had run the numbers, he had felt the controls, he knew the margins. But knowing the margins and convincing others were two different problems. The first time he tries to explain it to his squadron commander, the conversation is short. Carl describes the aerodynamics, the increase in lift coefficient, the reduction in turn radius, the potential to reverse a defensive position into an offensive one. The commander listens, then he tells Carl to stick to doctrine. Flaps are for landing. Combat is for speed. The Wildcat is not designed for this. The Navy's test pilots would have discovered it if it were viable. Do not reinvent the wheel. Do not get yourself killed trying. Carl does not argue. He simply continues flying. Other pilots notice. A few ask questions. Carl takes them up in two-plane sections and demonstrates. He enters a simulated dogfight, lets his wingman commit to a hard turn, then deploys flaps and cuts inside. The wingman is stunned. He radios back that it should not be possible. But it is. Still, the skepticism persists. Some call it a parlor trick, a stunt that works in training but will fail under fire. Others worry about structural limits. The flaps were not designed for high-G deployment. What if they fail? What if the hydraulics rupture? What if the added drag causes a flameout? Carl has no perfect answer. He only has results. He has used the technique in combat 4 times. 4 times he has survived. 4 times he has shot down an opponent who should have had the advantage. But results are hard to quantify in war. Every sortie is different. Every engagement is a tangle of variables. Maybe Carl survived because he was skilled. Maybe he was lucky. Maybe the Japanese pilots made mistakes. The technique remains unofficially tolerated. Carl is not reprimanded, but he is not endorsed either. The squadron does not adopt it. The wing does not teach it. It exists in a gray zone between innovation and insubordination. Carl does not push. He does not evangelize. He simply keeps flying the way he knows works. And then, in January 1943, everything changes. The mission is a routine combat air patrol over Guadalcanal. 4 Wildcats. Carl is flight leader. The sky is hazy, thin clouds at 8,000 feet. Below, the jungle is a dark green smudge against the blue. The radio crackles. Bogies inbound, bearing 340. High. Carl scans. There, 6 contacts, 2 divisions of 3. Zeros. Probably escorting a bomber formation that turned back. Now they are hunting. Carl calls the bounce. He takes his flight up and around, positioning for a high-side attack. The geometry is good. The Zeros have not seen them yet. He rolls in, picks a target, fires. The Zero breaks hard left, trailing smoke. Carl does not follow. He pulls up, scanning for threats. And there they are. 3 more Zeros. Close. Very close. They must have been above, waiting. The fight disintegrates into chaos. Carl breaks right. 1 Zero follows. Another slashes across his nose, forcing him to pull hard. His airspeed bleeds. He is down to 180 knots. Too slow. The Zero behind him is closing. He calls for his wingman. No answer. The radio is jammed with crosstalk. He pulls harder. The Wildcat shudders. He is at the edge of a stall. The Zero is still closing. He has 2 choices. He can unload, dive away, and hope to build enough speed to escape, or he can commit to the turn. He drops the flaps. Full deflection. The nose pitches down. He compensates with back pressure. The airspeed drops to 150, 140. The turn radius tightens. He feels the airframe groan. The controls are heavy, sluggish. The Wildcat is barely flying, but it is turning inside the Zero. The Japanese pilot does not react in time. He expects the Wildcat to slide wide. Instead, Carl rotates through the pure vertical, pulls the nose down, and rolls out behind him. The Zero fills his gun sight. Carl fires. A 2-second burst. The Zero's wing root explodes. The fighter rolls inverted and spins into the jungle below. Carl retracts the flaps. His airspeed builds. He scans. Clear. Another Zero is on his wingman. Carl reverses hard. The Zero sees him and brakes. It is a good brake, aggressive, designed to force Carl into an overshoot. Carl drops the flaps again. The Wildcat arcs through the sky, tracking the Zero through its turn. The Japanese pilot tries to reverse. Too late. Carl fires again. The Zero's canopy shatters. The aircraft noses over and dives. The remaining Zeros disengage. They have lost 4 aircraft. The Americans have lost none. Carl returns to Henderson. His wingman lands beside him. They shut down. The ground crew swarms the aircraft, checking for damage. The wingman climbs out, pale and shaking. He walks over to Carl and asks him how he did it. Carl tells him, flaps, full deflection, trade speed for radius, but only when you have no other option. The wingman stares. Then he nods. That evening, the squadron gathers for debriefing. Carl describes the engagement, the tactics, the flap deployment, the results. This time, no one interrupts. No one dismisses it. The squadron commander asks Carl to demonstrate it again, in front of the entire squadron. Carl agrees. The next morning, he takes up an aircraft with half the squadron watching from the flight line. He performs a series of turning engagements against another pilot. Each time he cuts inside, each time the flaps make the difference. The pilots see it, they understand it, and slowly, cautiously, they begin to try it themselves. By March 1943, the technique is spreading. Not officially. There are no training bulletins, no directive from Fleet Command. But pilots talk. They trade stories. They watch each other. And when someone survives an engagement they should not have survived, others pay attention. Carl rotates back to the States in April. He has 18 confirmed kills. He is awarded the Navy Cross. He is sent on a war bond tour, then reassigned as a test pilot. But the technique he pioneered remains in the Pacific. Marine and Navy squadrons begin incorporating flap deployment into their defensive tactics, not as doctrine, but as a tool, a last resort maneuver when altitude and speed are gone. Pilots learn the margins. They learn when it works and when it kills you. The results are measurable. Loss rates in turning engagements decline, not dramatically, but enough to notice. Pilots who would have died in a slow-speed scissors now survive. Some even reverse the engagement and score kills. The Japanese notice, too. After-action reports from captured or defecting pilots mention American fighters turning tighter than expected. They describe Wildcats behaving like lighter aircraft. The Zero's turn advantage, once absolute, becomes conditional. By mid-1943, the F-6F Hellcat begins replacing the Wildcat in frontline squadrons. The Hellcat is faster, more powerful, and more heavily armed. But even Hellcat pilots adopt the technique. Flaps in combat, used sparingly, used wisely. It becomes part of the oral tradition of naval aviation, not written down, not taught in flight school, but passed from veteran to rookie in the ready rooms and debriefing huts of the Pacific. Carl's contribution is never officially documented. There is no memo crediting him, no tactical bulletin bearing his name, but the men who flew with him know, and the men they trained know. The logic was simple, the courage was quiet, and the ripple effect saved lives. Marion Carl survives the war. He returns to test flying. In 1947, he breaks the world altitude record in a Douglas Skystreak. In 1953, he sets a new speed record. He flies experimental jets, rockets, and prototypes that exist only as blueprints. He retires as a major general in 1973. He lives quietly in Oregon, back where he started. He does not write a memoir. He does not tour the airshow circuit. He does not seek recognition. But in the archives of naval aviation, his name appears again and again, in after-action reports, in interviews with surviving pilots, in the margins of tactical manuals written decades after the war. They remember the man who turned with zeros. The technique itself fades. Modern fighters have variable geometry wings, fly-by-wire systems, and thrust vectoring. They do not need flaps to turn, but the lesson remains. Innovation does not wait for permission. It does not come from committees or headquarters. It comes from the edge, from the men and women who see the gap between what is and what could be, who test the margins, who risk failure in pursuit of a better answer. Carl's genius was not in defying authority. It was in understanding the machine better than the people who built it. He saw the F-4F not as a fixed system, but as a toolbox. He asked what else it could do, and then he proved it. The war was full of such men. Engineers who redesigned engines in the field, mechanics who kept crippled bombers flying, pilots who rewrote tactics in real time. Most of them are forgotten. Their names are not in textbooks. Their innovations are attributed to institutions, not individuals. But they were there. In the cockpits, in the hangars, in the desperate hours when logic and courage were the only weapons left. Marion Carl died in 1998. He was 83. He was shot and killed during a robbery at his home. It was a stupid, senseless death for a man who had survived hundreds of combat missions. But what he left behind was not senseless. It was a method, a way of thinking, a reminder that the rules are not the limits, only the starting point, and that sometimes the man who survives is not the one who follows the manual, but the one who understands it well enough to know when to set it aside. February 1943. A Grumman Wildcat returns to USS Ranger with a hole the size of a man's torso punched through its starboard wing. The fabric is shredded. The ribs are splintered. Command wants it scrapped. A 34-year-old machinist's mate named Frank Walters tells them he can fix it with sheet aluminum and rivets. They laugh. He does it anyway. 3 weeks later, that same wing survives a near-vertical dive through flak over Casablanca at 320 miles per hour. The North Atlantic in winter is a study in gray. Gray sea, gray sky, gray steel deck heaving beneath boots that never find sure footing. Carrier duty in early 1943 means cold that seeps through wool, through skin, into bone. It means aircraft that corrode faster than they can be maintained. It means pilots who need their planes ready yesterday and mechanics who work miracles with nothing. The USS Ranger is an older ship. Commissioned in 1934, she is smaller and slower than the Essex-class carriers that will dominate the later war. Her aircraft complement is modest. Her mission is unglamorous. Convoy escort, anti-submarine patrol, transport duty between Norfolk and North Africa. But her deck crews are as skilled as any in the fleet. They know how to stretch resources. They know how to improvise. On the flight deck, the sound is constant. Engines turning over, propellers biting cold air. The clang of wrenches and the hiss of pneumatic tools. Below deck, in the machine shop and repair bay, the noise is different, more intimate, more deliberate. The rasp of files, the whine of drill presses, the hammer-tap rhythm of rivet guns. This is where Frank Walters works. He is a machinist's mate first class, not an officer, not an engineer, not a designer. Just a man who understands metal the way a surgeon understands tissue. He knows how it bends, how it fails, how it holds. He has spent 20 years in machine shops, civilian and military, learning the grammar of stress and tolerance. He does not speak much. He listens to the metal. The Wildcat that lands on February 7th is a mess. Pilot barely kept it airborne. A German FW-190 caught him during a patrol sweep off the Moroccan coast. Cannon rounds stitched across the right wing. One punched clean through, tearing fabric and splintering the wooden ribs beneath. The damage is structural. The wing flex is wrong. Command tags it for depot-level repair, meaning it will be offloaded, sent stateside, and replaced. Walters looks at it differently. He walks around the aircraft slowly, runs his hand along the torn fabric, peers into the wound. The aluminum spar is intact. The main load-bearing structure is undamaged. Only the ribs and the fabric skin are compromised. In his mind, it is not a totaled wing. It is a repair problem, a solvable one. He tells the maintenance officer he can patch it. The officer looks at him like he suggested welding the wing back together with spit. Wildcats use fabric-covered wings. You do not just slap metal over fabric. The aerodynamics will be wrong. The weight distribution will be off. The flex characteristics will change. Fabric and metal expand at different rates. The patch will crack. The wing will fail. Walters listens, nods. Then he explains. The aluminum patch will be bonded directly to the spar and ribs. It will not replace the fabric. It will reinforce the damaged section. He will use thin sheet stock, not heavy plate. He will contour it to match the airfoil. He will rivet it in place with aircraft-grade fasteners, spaced close enough to distribute load, but not so close that they weaken the surrounding structure. The patch will be stronger than the original fabric. It will not flex more. It will flex less. That is the point. The officer is unconvinced, but the wing is already written off. If Walters wants to waste his time, fine. Just do not expect it to fly. Walters does not expect. He calculates. If this story matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Frank Walters was born in 1909 in Erie, Pennsylvania. His father worked the rail yards. His uncle ran a machine shop that serviced locomotives. Walters grew up around metal, hot, cold, cast, forged, welded, riveted. He learned young that metal has memory. It remembers how it was formed, how it was treated, how it was stressed. Push it too far and it fails. Respect its limits and it endures. He quit school at 16 to work full-time in his uncle's shop. By 18, he could operate a lathe, a mill, and a drill press with the precision of a journeyman twice his age. By 20, he was running jobs on his own, custom parts, one-off repairs, impossible tolerances. He did not design, he executed. But execution required understanding, and understanding required curiosity. He read engineering manuals at night, not for credentials, for comprehension. He wanted to know why a bolt sheared at a certain torque, why a casting cracked in cold weather, why one alloy held under fatigue and another did not. He did not pursue theory for its own sake. He pursued it because it made him better at solving real problems. When the Depression hit, the shop nearly folded. Walters took whatever work he could find: tool and die, automotive repair, fabrication. In 1935, he enlisted in the Navy. The pay was steady, the work was similar, and the machines were more interesting. Aircraft were the new frontier, lighter, faster, more demanding, tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, materials pushed to their limits. He served aboard USS Lexington as a machinist's mate, 3rd class. Then, aboard USS Saratoga, he was promoted twice. He earned a reputation as the man who could fix what others could not because he was smarter, because he looked closer. He asked better questions, he tested assumptions. By the time he transferred to USS Ranger in 1942, he was a first-class petty officer, senior enough to have authority in the shop, junior enough to still get his hands dirty. He preferred it that way. Leadership meant paperwork. He wanted tools. His crewmates called him Frank the Fix, not with irony, with respect. He did not boast. He did not grandstand. He just solved problems quietly and moved on to the next one. If a valve body cracked, he machined a new one. If a landing gear strut bent, he straightened it. If a propeller blade nicked, he filed it true. He was not a maverick. He followed procedure when procedure worked. But he understood something many officers did not. Procedure was a guideline written for the average case. War produced edge cases, and edge cases required judgment. The Wildcat wing was an edge case. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat is not the fastest fighter in the fleet. It is not the most maneuverable. It is not the longest ranged, but it is tough. Grumman builds aircraft like tanks, armor plate, self-sealing fuel tanks, robust structure. The Wildcat can take punishment and keep flying. Pilots trust it, maintainers respect it, but toughness has limits. By early 1943, the Wildcat is outclassed in the Pacific. The Japanese Zero is faster, climbs better, turns tighter. American pilots survive through tactics, dive and zoom, mutual support, disciplined gunnery. They do not dogfight. They do not turn. They rely on the Wildcat's durability and hit-and-run speed. In the Atlantic and Mediterranean, the threat is different. German fighters, Bf-109s and Fw-190s, are heavily armed and flown by experienced pilots. Encounters are brief and brutal. A single cannon hit can cripple an aircraft. Damage accumulates faster than repair capacity can manage. Carriers operating in these theaters face a chronic problem: aircraft availability. Planes are damaged faster than they can be fixed. Spare parts are scarce. Replacement aircraft take weeks to arrive. Every plane that can be returned to service matters. Every plane written off is a gap in the air wing. But Navy doctrine is rigid. Battle damage is categorized by severity. Minor damage, bullet holes, small tears, can be patched aboard ship. Major damage, structural failure, control surface loss, engine damage, requires depot-level repair. The damaged Wildcat falls into the latter category. The wing structure is compromised. Doctrine says it cannot be safely repaired at sea. Doctrine is written for good reason. Field repairs that fail in flight kill pilots. Improvised patches that do not account for aerodynamic loads can cause catastrophic failure. The Navy has seen it happen. A poorly executed repair is worse than no repair at all. Better to ground the aircraft than risk a pilot's life, but doctrine assumes you have replacement aircraft. USS Ranger does not. The damaged Wildcat is one of 18 operational fighters aboard. Lose one, and the air group is stretched thinner. Patrols get longer, combat air patrol gets weaker, fatigue accumulates. The maintenance officer knows this, so does the air group commander, so does the captain. They want the plane back, but they will not cut corners. They will not approve a repair that might kill someone. Walters understands this. He does not argue, he simply asks for permission to try. If the patch fails, the plane is already grounded. Nothing is lost. If it works, the air group gains an aircraft. The risk is his time and the ship's materials. The reward is operational readiness. The maintenance officer gives him 48 hours. If the repair looks sound, engineering will inspect it. If it passes inspection, they will consider a test flight. If it fails at any stage, the wing is scrapped. Walters nods. He does not need 48 hours. He needs 12. He begins by mapping the damage. Not by eye, by measurement. He uses calipers, straight edges, and feeler gauges to measure the distortion in the wing ribs. He traces the tear in the fabric. He checks the alignment of the spar. He documents everything in a pocket notebook. Dimensions, angles, distances. The main spar is undamaged. That is critical. The spar carries the primary flight loads, bending moment and shear stress from lift and maneuver. If the spar were cracked, the wing would be unsalvageable, but it is intact. The ribs, thin, stamped aluminum formers that give the wing its airfoil shape, are bent and torn. 3 of them are compromised. The fabric covering is shredded across a 2-foot span. Walters calculates the load path. In normal flight, the fabric skin does not carry much structural load. It provides aerodynamic shape and torsional stiffness. But in high-speed maneuvers, especially dives and hard turns, the skin carries significant shear. A fabric patch will not hold. Fabric fatigues, fabric stretches, fabric tears, metal will not. He selects a sheet of Neo 25-inch aluminum, thin enough to form without specialized tools, thick enough to carry shear load. He cuts a rough blank slightly larger than the damaged area. Then he begins shaping it. This is the part that cannot be rushed. The wing has a compound curve. Camber along the chord, twist along the span. The patch must conform to that curve without buckling or wrinkling. Walters works the metal slowly, using a sandbag and a mallet to form it incrementally. He checks the fit every few minutes, trims, reforms, rechecks. After 6 hours, the patch fits like skin. He drills rivet holes, carefully, spacing them to distribute the load without creating stress concentrations. He deburrs each hole by hand, cleans the surfaces, applies a thin layer of zinc chromate primer to prevent galvanic corrosion between the aluminum patch and the steel fasteners. Then he begins riveting. Each rivet must be set with the correct pressure. Too loose, and it will not clamp. Too tight, and it will crush the surrounding metal. Walters sets each one by feel. Tap, tap, tap. He listens to the pitch of the hammer, feels the resistance. When the rivet head is flush and the shank is tight, he moves to the next. It takes 3 hours to set 42 rivets. By the time he finishes, it is 0300. The hangar deck is quiet. Most of the crew is asleep. Walters steps back and examines the wing. The patch is smooth. The contour is clean. The fasteners are uniform. It looks factory, but looking right is not the same as being right. He runs his hand along the surface, feels for discontinuities, presses gently on the patch to check for flex. It moves, slightly, but no more than the surrounding structure. That is good. If it were too stiff, it would create a hard point. If it were too flexible, it would not carry load. He checks the alignment of the trailing edge, measures the chord at 3 stations, confirms the airfoil symmetry. Everything is within tolerance. He writes a 1-page report, lists the materials used, describes the repair process, notes the measured dimensions before and after, signs it, leaves it on the maintenance officer's desk. Then he goes to his rack and sleeps for 4 hours. The maintenance officer reads the report at 0700. He is skeptical, but the work is done, and the documentation is thorough. He walks down to the hangar deck with the ship's engineering officer and a structural inspector. They examine the wing for 30 minutes. The inspector taps the patch with a coin, listens to the ring, checks the rivet spacing with a ruler, runs a feeler gauge along the seams, pulls on the trailing edge to test for play. He does not speak, just nods occasionally. Finally, he looks at the maintenance officer. The repair is sound. Structurally, the wing is airworthy, but aerodynamically it is an unknown. The patch changes the surface. It adds weight. Not much, maybe 5 pounds, but enough to shift the center of gravity slightly. It might create turbulence at the boundary layer. It might affect stall characteristics. There is no way to know without flight testing. The maintenance officer asks if it is safe to test. The inspector pauses, then says yes, with limits. No aerobatics, no hard maneuvering, straight and level flight at moderate speed. If the wing behaves normally, they can expand the envelope. If it does not, they land immediately. The Air Group commander assigns the test flight to Lieutenant Paul Deckard. Deckard is not a test pilot. He is a section leader, experienced, steady, not prone to heroics. He has 300 hours in the Wildcat. He knows what normal feels like. He briefs with Walters beforehand, wants to understand the repair. Walters walks him through it, explains the load path, shows him the rivet pattern, tells him what to watch for: vibration, unusual drag, control flutter. Deckard listens, asks good questions. Then he suits up. The flight is scheduled for 1400 hours. Weather is clear, sea state is calm. The deck crew positions the Wildcat on the catapult. Deckard climbs in, runs the pre-flight checklist. Engines start. Instruments green. Control check. Everything normal. The catapult fires. The Wildcat leaps forward and climbs away from the ship. Deckard holds a shallow climb to 5,000 feet, levels off, trims the aircraft, checks the wings visually. No deformation, no flutter. He banks gently left, then right. The controls feel normal. No unusual drag, no asymmetry. He reports over the radio. All normal so far. He flies straight and level for 10 minutes, varies speed from 120 knots to 180 knots. The wing behaves identically to the undamaged side. No vibration, no buffet. He asks for permission to test a steeper bank. Maintenance approves. He rolls into a 60-degree turn, pulls 3 Gs, holds it through 360 degrees. The wing holds. The patch does not buckle. He levels off. Reports again. Still normal. The Air Group commander considers. They need to know if the wing will hold under combat loads, but they cannot test that safely at altitude. If something fails, Deckard might not recover. The smart move is to call it good enough and impose operational limits on the aircraft. No aerobatics, no hard pulls. But Deckard offers an alternative. Let him fly one practice dive, not a vertical dive. A 45-degree attack run like he would use on a ground target. That will load the wing with 4 to 5 Gs, real combat stress. If the patch holds, the aircraft is fully mission capable. If it does not, he will still have altitude to recover. The maintenance officer looks at the engineering officer. They both look at the captain over the radio circuit. The captain approves the test. Deckard climbs to 8,000 feet. He lines up on a heading that will take him clear of the ship. He throttles back, extends dive brakes, noses over. The Wildcat accelerates 180 knots, 200, 220. The airframe shudders slightly. Normal compressibility effects at high speed. The altimeter unwinds. 7,000 feet. 6,000. He steepens the dive to 50 degrees. Speed climbs to 240 knots. At 5,000 feet, he pulls. The G-forces slam him into the seat. The airframe groans. The wings flex upward, visible from the cockpit. He keeps the pull steady. 4 Gs, 5 Gs. The nose tracks through the horizon. He levels off at 3,000 feet. The wing is intact. No deformation, no cracks, no popped rivets. Deckard keys the radio. Patch is solid. Wing is good. He returns to the ship and lands without incident. Walters is on the deck when the plane traps. He does not approach, just watches from the catwalk as the plane director taxis the Wildcat to the line. When Deckard climbs out, he walks over to Walters, does not say much, just shakes his hand. The maintenance officer authorizes the Wildcat for full operational duty. The patched Wildcat flies 23 more combat sorties over the next 2 months. Convoy escort off the Azores, combat air patrol over Casablanca, ground attack missions in support of Operation Torch. The wing never fails, the patch never cracks. Other maintainers notice. By March, 2 more Wildcats with wing damage are repaired using Walters's method. By April, the technique has spread to USS Santee and USS Suwannee, escort carriers operating in the same theater. By June, it is documented in a Naval Aviation Maintenance Bulletin as an approved field repair for fabric-covered wings with rib damage and intact spars. The repair saves aircraft. That is measurable. But the larger impact is cultural. It demonstrates that field-level maintainers can solve problems that doctrine says require depot-level facilities. It shows that improvisation, disciplined, documented, tested improvisation, can be as reliable as factory work. It validates the judgment of experienced petty officers who understand their aircraft better than the manuals do. This matters in a war where logistics is as critical as firepower. Every aircraft kept in service is one less aircraft that must be built, shipped, and delivered. Every day a plane stays operational is one more day it can fly missions. Multiply that across a fleet, and the effect is significant. By mid-1943, the Navy is producing detailed technical bulletins on field repair techniques. Some are born from necessity, some from ingenuity. Walters's metal wing patch is among them. It is not revolutionary, it is not glamorous, but it works. And in a war fought on thin margins, that is enough. Walters himself does not dwell on it. He moves on to the next problem: a cracked engine mount, a bent propeller hub, a fractured hydraulic line. The work never stops. The ship keeps moving. The aircraft keep flying. He is promoted to Chief Petty Officer in August 1943, transferred to USS Essex in 1944, serves through the end of the war, musters out in 1946 with a Navy Commendation Medal, awarded not for a single act, but for sustained excellence in keeping aircraft flying under difficult conditions. The citation does not mention the wing patch. It does not need to. The patch is part of a larger pattern, a habit of solving problems instead of accepting them, a refusal to let doctrine become dogma, a respect for the metal, the aircraft, and the pilots who depended on both. Frank Walters returned to Erie in 1946. He bought a small machine shop with his mustering out pay and a veteran's loan. He ran it for 30 years, doing the same kind of work he had always done: custom parts, repair jobs, impossible tolerances. He trained apprentices. He took on work other shops would not touch. He never advertised, did not need to. Word of mouth was enough. He rarely spoke about the war, not out of trauma, out of habit. The work had been the work. He had done what needed doing. So had everyone else. In 1978, a naval historian researching carrier maintenance in the Atlantic Theater came across the 1943 Maintenance Bulletin. The metal wing patch technique was attributed to a machinist's mate aboard USS Ranger. The historian tracked Walters down through Navy records, asked if he would be interviewed. Walters agreed. The interview was brief. He described the repair clearly and without embellishment, explained the reasoning, noted that the technique had been refined and improved by others, said he was glad it had been useful. The historian asked if he had been nervous when Lieutenant Deckard tested the wing. Walters thought about it, then said no. He had checked the math. He had done the work correctly. The patch would hold or it would not. Nervousness would not change that. The historian asked what he was most proud of from his service. Walters paused, then said he was proud that the pilots trusted the work, that they flew the aircraft he maintained without hesitation. That was the job, keeping them safe, keeping them flying. He died in 1991 at the age of 82. His obituary in the Erie Times-News mentioned his Navy service in a single sentence. It did not mention the wing patch. It did not mention the bulletin. It noted that he had run a respected machine shop and trained a generation of machinists. But in the archives of the Naval Aviation History Branch, the 1943 Maintenance Bulletin remains. It is a dry, technical document, 3 pages, diagrams, rivet spacing, material specifications, no drama, no flourish, just a solution to a problem. The patched Wildcat, Bureau number 2296, survived the war. It was retired in 1945 and eventually scrapped. No plaque, no museum. The aluminum patch that saved it was cut apart and melted down, its metal recycled into something else. But the idea endured. In every conflict since, maintainers have faced the same dilemma: how to keep aging aircraft flying when parts are scarce and time is short. They improvise, they adapt, they test, they document, they pass the knowledge on. Some of them know the story of Frank Walters, most do not, but they follow the same principle: respect the machine, understand the loads, do the work right, trust the math. It is not heroism in the traditional sense. There are no medals for riveting a patch, no songs written about machinists' mates. But there is a kind of honor in it, the honor of competence, of responsibility, of caring enough to get it right when lives depend on it. Frank Walters did not mock the men who doubted him. He did not prove them wrong out of pride. He simply understood something they did not yet see: that metal, properly applied, could do what fabric could not. He fixed the wing. The wing held. The pilot came home. That is the whole story, and it is enough.